Have you ever wondered, why would entire civilizations obey a single man? Why would people sacrifice their food, their freedom, even their children, just because someone told them the gods demanded it? The answer isn't as simple as fear of punishment. It's much darker than that. This is the story of how kings and priests used myths, not just as tales to explain the stars or the rain, but as powerful tools of psychological control. Mind games that shaped empires, built monuments, and controlled millions. Stay with me. Because once you see how these games worked, you'll realize they never truly disappeared. Thousands of years ago, life was terrifying. Thunder, earthquakes, famine, disease. People didn't understand why these things happened. And in the absence of knowledge, stories filled the gap. But some people realized something incredible. If you could control the story, you could control the people. The priest who said, "The storm came because you disobeyed the gods," instantly became more than a storyteller. He became a judge, a ruler, a master of the human mind. And rulers, kings, pharaohs, emperors saw the opportunity. A myth wasn't just a story. It was a chain. Let's start with ancient Egypt. The pharaoh wasn't just a king. He was a living god. Why did this work so perfectly? Because the myth made obedience sacred. If the pharaoh is a god, then disobeying him isn't just rebellion, it's blasphemy. And so, generation after generation, Egyptians built pyramids, temples, and entire cities under the belief that serving the pharaoh was serving eternity itself. Think about it. Do you really believe millions of people would spend decades hauling stones, living and dying in service of a monument, if not for a story that convinced them their souls depended on it? This wasn't just politics. It was psychological engineering. Now, let's travel to ancient Greece, the Oracle of Delphi. Kings, generals, and even philosophers traveled from across the world just to hear the words of Apollo from the mouth of a priestess sitting in a smoke-filled chamber. But here's the truth. It wasn't magic. It was psychology. Priests controlled access to the oracle. They shaped the prophecies, often vague enough to mean whatever the leaders wanted. And those divine messages? They conveniently aligned with political agendas. Example, a general might ask, "Should I go to war?" The oracle replies, "A great empire will fall." The general hears what he wants. He marches to war. And if he loses, well, the prophecy was still right. A great empire fell. His own. Do you see the trick? It wasn't about being correct. It was about being in control of the story people believed. China had its own version, the mandate of heaven. Every emperor claimed he was chosen by heaven itself. And whenever one dynasty collapsed, the next didn't just take power, they claimed heaven had revoked its mandate. This myth turned politics into destiny. You couldn't just be angry at the emperor, you'd be angry at heaven. And that meant obedience wasn't just smart. It was sacred. But let's go even darker. The Aztecs believed the sun would die unless it was fed human blood. Do you understand what kind of psychological grip that creates? If you don't give your gods blood, the entire world ends. So people willingly climbed the pyramids, laid down their lives, and let their hearts be cut out, because the myth was stronger than the instinct to survive. That's not just religion. That's the ultimate mind game. Notice the pattern? Everywhere in the world, myths weren't just spiritual, they were political weapons. Priests and kings didn't rule with armies alone. They ruled with ideas. Invisible chains wrapped around millions of minds. And here's the darkest part. Once a story takes root, people enforce it on themselves. You don't need soldiers on every corner. You just need people to believe. And that, my friend, is why myths weren't just entertainment. They were tools of control, weapons of psychology. The original mind games played on humanity. But we're just scratching the surface. Because the scariest truth isn't how myths began. It's how they evolved. And how their grip may be even stronger today than it ever was in the ancient world. We've seen how myths explained the unknown, demanded blood, and forged empires. But here's where it gets even darker. Myths never truly disappeared. They evolved. And their grip on human behavior may be stronger today than it ever was in the ancient world. In the beginning, myths were just stories told around fires. But over time, kings and priests realized something. If you repeat the same story enough, it stops being a tale and becomes truth. That's how myths became religions. And once you have religion, you don't just have stories. You have laws, rituals, entire societies built on belief. Think about it. If a king says, "Obey me or die," people resist. But if he says, "Obey me or the gods will punish you," resistance disappears. That's the real genius of myth. It makes people police themselves. Take the Roman Empire. Rome wasn't just soldiers and roads, it was held together by myths. Roman emperors declared themselves divine, demanded loyalty as sacred duty, and rewrote old legends to justify their rule. When Julius Caesar died, his heir Augustus spread the myth that Caesar had been taken up as a god in the sky. Do you see the move? Killing a dictator is easy, but killing a god? Impossible. That's how myths turned political assassinations into spiritual impossibilities. They rewrote reality itself. Now let's go into the ultimate mind game, the afterlife. In ancient Egypt, priests convinced people that their souls would be judged after death. If they didn't obey, if they didn't pay tribute, perform rituals, or serve the pharaoh, their hearts would be devoured for eternity. Imagine the psychological grip of that belief. Not only do you control a person's life, you control their death, their eternity. That's not power. That's total domination. And myths didn't just control individuals, they controlled whole groups. In Mesopotamia, the Code of Hammurabi declared that laws came directly from the gods. Breaking the law wasn't just illegal, it was sacrilegious. In India, the caste system was reinforced by stories that said you were born into your position because of divine order. See the trick? Myth turned inequality into destiny, oppression into natural law, and rebellion into sin. Here's the part people don't realize. Myths allowed kings and priests to rule without massive armies. Think about it, keeping millions of people under control with swords alone is impossible. Armies are expensive. Rebellions are constant. But a good myth? That's an invisible army inside every person's head. It makes the farmer obey the priest. It makes the slave believe they're serving a higher purpose. It makes the citizen enforce the rules on their neighbor. This is the true genius of ancient mind games. You don't need chains on the body, if you already have chains on the mind. And yet, myths weren't just about obedience, they were about profit. Priests demanded sacrifices, offerings, and wealth for the gods. But where did that gold actually go? Into temples, into palaces, into the pockets of those who wrote the myths. A myth of divine wrath justified endless taxes. The myth of holy war justified endless bloodshed. And the myth of silence, don't question the gods, killed every voice of dissent before it could even speak. Now, here's the question you've been waiting for. Did these mind games ever end? Look around. We no longer sacrifice on stone altars. But do we not sacrifice in other ways? Our time, our money, our loyalty often to systems and leaders that feel just as unquestionable as the priests and kings of the past. The names have changed. The myths have changed. But the psychological weapons? They're the same. Fear, obedience, stories so powerful we mistake them for reality. So what do we learn from this? That the greatest power in history wasn't the sword, the army, or the empire. It was the story. A well-told myth could build cities, raise monuments, and turn ordinary people into willing servants of kings and priests. And perhaps the scariest truth of all, we think we're smarter now. We think we've escaped. But in every headline, every ideology, every system that demands loyalty. The ancient mind games are still there. So the next time you hear a story that demands your loyalty, your obedience, or your sacrifice, ask yourself, is this truth? Or is this just another myth? Because history has already shown us. The oldest and deadliest form of power isn't force. It's belief. We've seen how myths explained the unknown, demanded blood, and forged empires. But here's where it gets even darker. Myths never truly disappeared. They evolved. And their grip on human behavior may be stronger today than it ever was in the ancient world. When you think of myth, you picture ancient gods, temples, and rituals. But myths don't have to be about Zeus, Ra, or Odin. A myth is any story powerful enough to shape how people live, how they obey, and how they die. And once kings and priests perfected these tricks, modern rulers picked them up and refined them. Take nations. Every modern country is built on a story. In the United States, it's the myth of freedom, the founding fathers, the idea that anyone can rise from nothing to greatness. Are these things true? Sometimes. But here's the point. Whether true or not, they function exactly like ancient myths. They inspire loyalty. They demand sacrifice. They tell millions of people to kill or die under the banner of a flag. That's not just patriotism. That's mythology. The myth of the nation is one of the most powerful mind games ever created. Politicians understand this better than anyone. They don't just offer policies. They tell stories. A story of fear. If you don't elect me, disaster will strike. A story of hope. I alone can save you. A story of destiny. We are chosen. We are special. We are different. Does this sound familiar? It should, because it's the same playbook used by pharaohs, Caesars, and emperors thousands of years ago. Only the stage has changed. And don't think religion is gone. It's simply evolved. Today's megachurches, televangelists, and global movements still use the same psychological tools. Fear of punishment. Promise of reward. Authority claimed not from reason, but from the divine. In the ancient world, priests told you the gods were watching. Today, they might tell you the universe is watching. The wording shifts, but the effect is identical. Now let's look somewhere even more surprising. Business. Why do millions of people line up overnight for a new phone? Why do we worship brands as if they were living gods? Because corporations mastered the art of modern myth-making. Logos are symbols. Advertisements are rituals. And customer loyalty is just another word for belief. Think about it. People tattoo brands on their bodies. They defend billion-dollar companies like they would defend their own family. That's not consumer behavior. That's religious devotion. And then there's the media, the modern myth machine. Every day, news outlets, movies, and social platforms tell us what to fear, who to admire, and what to believe. Heroes and villains are crafted in real time. Entire narratives are built and repeated until they feel like reality. Remember, the human brain doesn't need truth to believe. It only needs repetition. The priests of old repeated myths around campfires. The priests of today repeat myths through 24-hour broadcasts, viral posts, and endless feeds. The temple is now your screen. So let's break it down. Ancient priests controlled people with 3 weapons: fear of death, of gods, of punishment. Reward, promises of paradise, salvation, or prosperity. Repetition, telling the story until it became unquestionable truth. Now look at today's systems: political, religious, corporate, digital. The weapons are the same. Fear, reward, repetition. The faces are new. The myths are modern. But the psychology? It hasn't changed for 5,000 years. Here's the most chilling part. When a myth controls you, you don't even realize it's happening. The farmer in ancient Egypt believed he was serving the gods when really he was serving the pharaoh. The citizen today believes they're making independent choices, when really, they may just be following the myths of nation, faith, or brand. That's the trap. The most dangerous chains are the ones you can't see. So what can you do? First, recognize the myth. Ask, who benefits from this story? Who gains power, wealth, or obedience when I believe it? Second, question repetition. If something is said over and over, does that make it truth or just propaganda? And third, remember the lesson of history. Every empire, every religion, every system built on myth eventually falls. Because when people see the story for what it is, the spell breaks. The mind games of priests and kings never ended. They only got smarter. And the question is no longer whether you believe in Zeus or Ra. The question is, what myths do you believe today? And are they guiding you or controlling you? So the next time you hear a story that demands your loyalty, your obedience, or your sacrifice, pause. Because it may not be truth at all. It may just be the oldest trick in human history. An ancient mind game.